Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to go over the decision on what suspension system that we're going to run in the Falcon. I know about a month ago it returned to the nest after we decided we were going to eliminate the shock towers, the Chris Austin front conversion coilover kit, as well as the rear G-link. We talked about some of the shortcomings in the chassis and subframe and about wanting to make the car better. As part of that, as you guys know, I was kicking around the idea of going between Roadster shop spec chassis or a fast track chassis versus Detroit Speed. And after kind of doing a lot of research, including bouncing ideas back and forth between Moit's Motor Cars in Australia, Roadster shop chassis, and the time that it would take for Roadster shop chassis to deliver a chassis, which was about 6 months, we decided that the best thing to do was to go with the Detroit Speed front AlumaFrame kit. That's what I want to talk to you guys about today. Detroit Speed AlumaFrame. What we're going to do is we're going to unbox the parts together. This arrived a few days ago. Now I got it laid out and I wanted to go over this suspension kit with you guys. Very impressed with Detroit Speed. There's a few pieces that I opened up. They shipped earlier, such as the motor mounts and the power steering hydraulic lines. The thing I want to talk about with Detroit Speed is if you look at everything that they manufactured in-house, has a Made in America sign. So the promotion of Made in the US, we expect quality parts. So let's unbox this together and let's talk about really the reason why I decided to go with the Detroit Speed, and let's take a look at the... All right, first up, this is kind of just an open and unfold box, but what we have here is the JRI single adjustable shocks. This is what will be on the front of the Falcon as part of their front AlumaFrame, which is basically a cradle with an integrated, if you want to call it a Mustang too, I think that's a real dated term to use. It eliminates the shock towers, and then you have coilovers that go, you have coil springs that ride in between these. As you can see, it's got the adjustable collar, so you can set your ride height. Pretty trick. And then here's your valving down here, and it's also got port for either introducing air or nitrogen to the strut. So I'm really impressed with this stuff. First rate parts, really impressed. Moving along. Nice upper control arm. This system will feature C6 uprights, or it'll feature C6 spindles, but it's what they call uprights. And so now the geometry on this car will be completely different. But looking at this, it's powder coated. It's got the pressed in bushing with Zerk fittings to lubricate. Underneath the other control arm. So I guess this is both upper control arms for driver and passenger side. So what we have here is basically driver and passenger side, and they are side specific. They are not interchangeable. As you can see, they have a little marking there, left for driver side and right for passenger side. So all right, let's get into this next package. Sweet, this is their coil springs to ride on the JRI struts. I like the way they package this stuff, by the way. They got some language here for it. Take a look at these. Pretty straightforward. Just a front coil spring. Yeah, so far just impressed. I'd imagine this is probably the cradle, and it probably weighs in the neighborhood of 60 pounds. The dimensions of this box is probably, I'd say, 30 inches by 15 tall by probably 30 inches wide. It's not the biggest or most heaviest piece of freight, but in this package overall, it was the largest one. Dimensions on the freight was like 8 foot long, 3 feet wide, and like 2 feet tall. And the freight overall was like just under 400 pounds. They custom built a cradle to ship on via freight. So it was FedEx freight. Shout out to Ruben Precision and his team. Have been more than helpful. Just a great group of guys to work with, him, his family, and his team. Really grateful to have them. So shout out to Ruben's Precision. Also want to take a moment to give a shout out to CSM Racing Engines, TOE Performance. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. So, and again, thanks to the Falcon community. Let's continue. All right. Opening this stuff, I try not to damage the box because you never know if you have to return something. Their packaging is pretty up to par. Detroit Speed channel, they go in depth on their content. One of the things that you learn is that their quality control and their manufacturing from inception to delivery is on point. So these little things here, you'll notice, you'll see those foamy popcorn looking things, or you'll see like some kind of cardboard or paper. But this thing here on their channel, they mentioned that this is like a patent. And what happens is if you unbox something outside and it's windy, it won't roll or blow away. So, and I believe it's like 100% recyclable. So everything they do, every move they have is with purpose. So you got to kind of appreciate them for doing that. One thing I will say, I was kind of concerned because I did see some reviews from some of you guys on the Detroit Speed Facebook group. And I know they were about a year ago, the owner, Kyle Tucker, the owner, about a little over a year ago, sold Detroit Speed to Holley. And so there was a lot of concern on whether the QC would be up to par, whether the tech support from the guys would be up to par. That was something I was aware of going in. I know a lot of times when a smaller company is sold to underneath a larger umbrella, sometimes the customer service, the attention to detail, that stuff can kind of go along or go away with it. As far as my understanding, Kyle Tucker is still a consultant and still kind of like the lead, but they fall up underneath Holley now. So Holley makes all the decisions because they're owned by them. And so that has a lot of impact in terms of the way a company can promote themselves, market, because it's no longer under Detroit Speed. It's Detroit Speed branded. They still have their facility in Mooresville, North Carolina, but they are owned by Holley now. So take that for what it's worth. A lot of times for changes to happen in a company, it takes a couple years. So this is still kind of the early phase. I'd be interested to see in a year or two down the road from now where they go. As of now, I made the order through Matt Bellamy. He was very helpful, very knowledgeable. There's also a Matt Neal and a Patrick. So I just want to give a shout out to those guys. I appreciate you helping me with the order. And as you know, this is just only part of the process. The install to the tuning is still something that has to be ironed out. But thankfully, on our team, we have a deck of solid fabricators as well as installers, engine builders. Very fortunate to have and be part of the team that I've been able to be part of. All right. Looks like some smaller boxes. Underneath this sea of hardware, I think this is probably safe to say it's the cradle underneath the crush tubes and the hardware. This kit is pretty much a bolt in and then eventually weld it to the chassis. So it's not something that it's pretty involved, but I can already see the cradle. And it's this thing here. All right, it's gonna get messy in here. Their packaging is definitely on point. They are not playing. All right, so I picked up the cradle, and I would say this thing probably weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 pounds. All their stuff is serviceable, by the way, so you can always send it to them and they can do their servicing to it. It has a limited warranty. Not that I would expect a super high-end warranty, but as you can see, made in the USA, DSE, I mean, they have their own, and then into this, you can see the splined, that would be for the sway bar, which is splined. So you gotta like that. And then you can see the pocket for where the rack and pinion is gonna have the steering shaft connect. So that conveniently is routed away from the headers. I know for a lot of us, including myself, good steering angle geometry. And you can see in this thing, I mean, we're running a Flaming River universal. All right, we got a flashlight, but just look at that angle. I mean, that can't be good for steering geometry or steering. And I mean, that was a tough squeeze going through the headers. So all this junk here is coming out, and we're gonna go and hopefully have that steering shaft follow the line of my light, which will be somewhere through here, right on around the headers. So definitely looking forward to getting rid of that. Now with their shock tower delete panels, you can either fully weld it in or you can make it to where it's bolt in. I'm gonna do the bolt in option, just for the simple fact that if you ever need to get maintenance around here, it's always easier to remove it, and now you have an access panel. So I'm gonna do the bolt-in function of their shock tower delete panel. But yeah, I mean, look at that. So this is basically a universal shaft with a joint down there. I don't know if you guys can see that, but then that joint goes to the Flaming River power rack and pinion, which leaked from day one. So I'll be getting rid of that stuff. It's got the Chris Austin G-Link. I've went in detail on this car with you guys on the channel. So let's see if I can get up under there. But it's got the Chris Austin G-Link. A decent system, is capable, is very capable and proven from my understanding. It is a capable system. I'm just at this point now where I think it's better just to get rid of it. So I don't know what I'll do with this system. It may be available on the market before too long, but it's a good system. It's just not something I wanted to roll anymore. We're also gonna have to swap pans. That's an Aviad. If, you know, for the early Fords, if you're running a Mustang or Cougar, you're gonna be running a, what they call a front sump pan to clear the subframe. On the Falcon, 3rd gen Falcons, these subframes are not removable. On 60 to 65 they are, but for 66 through 69, they're fixed. So that is not removable on the 3rd gen Falcons, which is one of the reasons why we just want to delete it and cut it away. You can see the Flaming River power rack. It's got a bump steer kit. Again, this thing, the weak part about this suspension really was the free play in the steering wheel and not knowing where you were on over upset roads with like bumps and jounces and stuff. Confidence inspiring. It's not safe for driving. Now on a straight smooth road, when you were engaged, once you got a half inch off of the free play, the thing was dialed in. I mean, it could take off ramps at 70 plus miles an hour. And mind you, on our 888R, 265, 35, 18 up front, 335, 30, 18 out back. We're just gonna get rid of that. The pan of choice is gonna be the Aviad rear sump road race pan. But unfortunately, I think, looking like Aviad does not have even material to make pans right now. So the second runner-up is going to be a Canton 15-694 oil pan, which is a Fox body style pan. Of course, to clear this front subframe, you have to run a Fox body style pan. Detroit Speed also offers a Moroso road race style pan that clears it. Moroso would be my 3rd and last choice. So I'm going to try and run the Canton. First choice is going to be Aviad or Aviade. Second choice is going to be the Canton. Moroso will be the absolute, like, I have to, and that's not a pan I look forward to running at all. As you guys know, it's any engine builder will tell you, I guess it's normal and accepted practice to have oil pans show up warped, leak, not even flush. You have to clearance them, especially if you're running 4-bolt main caps on all 5 journals on your engine block. It's just bullshit. So I think now you know, I'd rather stick to Aviad. CSM Racing Engines and TOE Performance actually got with Aviad and helped them develop a pan because they build road race motors. Sears Point and Monterey, and so they built some of that Trans Am and vintage road race series stuff. That's some of their customer base, and they don't have issues with the wet sump, and that's even through road courses like Monterey and Sonoma. So if that don't tell you that it's a good pan, I don't know what else does. The other thing I thought about was a dry sump. It requires a lot of plumbing, and now you're carrying 16 quart of oil on board a vehicle that's street driven. This stuff could be hitting up. There it is. Hardware. These are what they call the crush tubes, and here's the drill bit. They'll tap through the frame rail, and you see where those holes are on the subframe. Basically, that will be sandwiched between the frame rails at the end of the day. All right, done digging through there for now. Take a look at some of these smaller items. Here's the hardware. So this is upper control arm hardware bag. Mustang rack and pinion hardware bag. All grade 8 bolts. Of course, you would want to use grade 8 bolts and suspension components, especially when they're corresponding with the chassis. Lower control arm hardware bag. All the stuff is labeled. And frame rail mount hardware bag. So these will be where the frame will be basically bolted with crush tubes to the frame and then sealed off and welded. So it'll basically become part of the frame now. Here we go. So here's coilover hardware mount bag. So these, I forget the name of these kind of bearings, Torrington bearings, but this rides between the sleeve of the coilover and where the spring is. So basically it prevents spring binding. So it allows the suspension to travel articulate, but you don't have any binding because you got these bearings here. So very small, very important small detailed piece of this build. And definitely something you want to handle carefully. The grade 8 bolts. The thing about grade 8 bolts is, you know, you can go and source these bolts from a hardware store and stuff like that if you ever have anything missing. So it's not the end of the world, but that's good to know there. Alrighty, got to get in the instructions and really read the details, figure out what these go to. Working with one hand. These are the bump stops, I believe. I'm going to go through the instructions and read everything in detail. These are, I know what these are, I recognize them, I've seen them in the video, but I'm drawing blanks on the name of them. But they are a component that's welded in. I believe these weld to the frame rail, the aluminum frame to the front subframe. Cotter pins and castle nuts for the control arms, or for the ball joints. Right on. These also have torque specs. I think they're all in the video, in the install video. Like I said, I'll link that. Westward bit socket, hex 3/8 drive, metric 12mm. Alrighty. These are the crush tubes. Basically, these go through the aluminum frame and through the actual frame, and then there's some hardware that goes there, bolted top and bottom, and then you have a bracket and you seal it all in. But these are the crush tubes. Six each. There we go. And it appears to be like a front and rear type one. Again, everything in this kit has a purpose. This looks like the collars for the rack and pinion going to the splining to the sway bar. I believe those interface, and I think there's pieces in here that are actually treated. These are definitely rack and pinions. I believe these are like a crush sleeve. They have to be torque. This stuff has torque specs. And they have a complete install video. They have a product layout video, and they have an install video on their website. I'll drop those links in the description for the Detroit Speed Alumiframe breakout, the quality control process, and the install. Look like tie rods, lower tie rods. I think these spline into the ends of the sway bar or the rack. These look like OEM style. So OEM style, if it's manufactured from like GM or Ford, OEM standard is a good quality. A lot of times, some of this aftermarket stuff, honestly, is just welded on tubing. But in cases where you're engineering a kit together, sometimes it's okay to use a combination of OEM quality and then improved upon quality. All right, on to the rest of these things. I don't want to bore you guys with a bunch of box cutter content. These are the sandwich tubes that are going to sandwich the frame rail with the aluminum frame. I can already tell. Oops, party foul. These are all the material to weld up the frame, and I believe this is gonna probably somehow go like, maybe like that, but anyways, there's that, and here's the tubes. Heavy duty steel, as it should be. Pretty straightforward. Complete instruction on the quadrilink rear. I was thinking about running the quadrilink, but I will do the universal fit. The difference is the quadrilink fits the Mustang. The universal is something that you'll be basically fabricating up yourself. Here's some of the goodies. This is what we're looking at. The spindles, or what they call the uprights. Heavy duty, high grade stuff here. And when you sign on to this, you're basically signing on to accept C6 brakes. It's even got looks like a wheel speed or ABS sensor. And that's pretty trick. Pretty trick. And this stuff isn't, when you see it on their show, you know, you see the aluminum piecing and it looks pretty light. But this thing here is pretty beefy. I'd say this is a solid, probably somewhere around the neighborhood of a 15, 20 pound chunk of aluminum and bearings and steel and spline or whatever. And it is side specific. It is not, they are not interchangeable. They go on a specific side. You can see they have wheel studs already pressed in. And this is serviceable and rebuildable. So just whatever you do with this, there is a warranty function of this. So however you handle and whatever processes you put it through, you have to be mindful, because this is something that they will warrant and rebuild. And I guess a good way to tell, because I don't see any markings as far as what side they go on, other than these little caps they put on top of them to protect them. So I already went ahead and just marked it with a permanent marker for now. But looking at a similar pattern, another way to tell just by looking at them is the leading edge of these. So the right side, the leading edge will have the knuckle, the rack and pinion, or a similarity you can see. So the left side, meaning left side on the driver's side, the rack and pinion attachment knuckle is on the forward edge of it, or leading edge. Same thing for the passenger side. So that's a way to tell, just identify the difference between the two. But I mean, these pieces are beefy. All right, getting down to Last few items here. There we are. Here's the lower control arms. And pretty much you sign up for C6 brakes and suspension geometry when you purchase this. You're signing up for C6 brake components and steering geometry, which isn't a bad thing. With the uprights, you can either run a GM or a Ford lug pattern, so that part's flexible. But the brakes, you have to run Corvette style brakes, and that's just the way it is on it. So lower control arm. Everything looks good there. The quality of parts, what you get with this, is definitely top flight. And we're down to the last piece, which should be the rack and pinion. Pretty straightforward. Looks like a good piece. So one of the things that I did purchase was the upgraded stainless steel hoses. They recommended that for clearance, not to run the hard line. So for clearance, you just want to make sure that you clear, you have enough clearance and flexibility of what a hose would provide. And that was their main reason for recommending running the hoses, is that, as you know, a lot of these cars are low, and when you're driving on the street, you have obstacles that can get you into some trouble. So, and that gives you an idea of how the front rack and pinion, the angle of attack on the steering shaft, little pocket in the aluminum frame is perfect, because it just allows for the steering angle to direct away from the headers, a direct line of sight to the steering wheel as possible. It looks pretty good. I noticed in the bottom of the packaging where the cylinder, or where the spline shaft was resting, there was some oil. I don't know if that's manufacturing coating or if it's a leak. So hopefully it's just manufacturing process. But we have just unboxed the Detroit Speed aluminum frame system. For you guys know, I don't have a Mustang. This is going into a 68 Falcon, also known as a 3rd gen. Again, we'll be eliminating these shock towers, and we'll have to swap the oil pan from a front sump to a rear sump to clear that cradle back there. So that's kind of where we are. That's what we signed up for. So now the only thing we got to do is source the oil pan that I discussed earlier. And I think from there, we'll jump in line with the fabricator. Definitely looking forward to getting this stuff installed. So looking to do the quadrilink in the rear and move away from the Chris Austin G-Link out back. Chris Austin G-Link, it served its purpose, very short-lived. The most important part is just to get rolling with this. So let me kind of recap on why I decided to go with the Detroit Speed aluminum frame versus the Roadster Shop spec chassis or fast track chassis. One was the fitment, and to put a chassis on a car is an extreme amount of work. It takes a competent, experienced fabricator to do so. That is not myself. The other thing was trying to make sure that we had the closest chassis that would fit. And we were after something with the XR and XY Falcons in Australia. Roadster Shop Chassis did a chassis for Moit's Motor Cars. Moit's Motor Cars out of Sydney, Australia, they had several chassis built using a 3D scan tool that they sent over to Roadster Shop Chassis, and they were able to spec these chassis out for them. We went through processes of talking on WhatsApp, sending messages for about 2 weeks. And I think where the most questionable point would have been is at the rear, where the rear subframe ends and you go up to the wheel wells beneath the back seat. I think that would have been the most challenging part. The other thing was making sure the wheelbases were the same. So had you had a difference in wheelbase, that could have really, that would have been another issue. So doing a full chassis is really involved. And but I want to give a shout out to the Roadster Shop. The guys there were very, very pleasant to deal with, very professional, knew their business. And also I want to give a shout out to Moist Motor Cars. As for now, I'm about approximately 4 weeks in before we get this stuff over to the shop so we can tear out this front end and start on the aluminum frame. So with that being said, guys, I think now we're just gonna going and I'll wrap this one up. I want to remind you guys, if you like these videos, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't, subscribe already. If you don't like the video and you need to hit the thumbs down, you're welcome to do that as well. But for now, we'll be signing off. We appreciate you supporting the channel, and we'll see you soon.